Hello world, welcome to another episode on the Fourth Heritage Mindset. Today, I'm continuing my book review series by hosting my third guest, Mrs. Yvonne Mpanga. We shall be discussing her take on my summary paper, the EDISAC framework. For those who missed the previous two book review episodes, I will leave the links to their videos in the description box below. Before I go any further, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so that you are notified every time I upload a new video. Now, without wasting much time, let's get started. Yvonne, you're most welcome to the Fourth Heritage Mindset. How are you?
Thank you, Emmanuel. I'm fine. How are you?
That's good. To start off our discussion, if you don't mind, who are you and what do you do?
Oh, that's a good one. By the way, you introduced me as Mrs. Yvonne Mpanga.
Yeah.
I am Yvonne Mpanga, but I'm Mrs. Yvonne Mpanga Simogere. I do business development consultancy. I've done that for the last 10 years. My focus is mainly marketing, communications, and public relations. I also sit on several boards here in Uganda. I am on the board of Development Education Awareness Program, B, which helps to educate children countrywide in the villages regarding understanding the wealth of a woman. I'm also on the board of GSM Women Concerned for Community Development. That is basically empowering ladies, especially in Wakiso and Kampala. I'm the board member publicity and program for the East Africa's largest body for women. It's called Uganda Women Entrepreneurs. And I'm also a public relations practitioner, and I'm on the board of PRAO, which we call Public Relations Association of Uganda, which takes private and public practitioners in public relations. But that is not what really defines me. What defines me is that I'm a formidable person. I like to learn and I like to reinvent myself. And reading EDISAC is one of those things that attracted me to you specifically. Because I was like, oh, there are many people out there who understand that crying fall, we were colonized. I know I'll talk about that later. I like the way you call it when you talk about the 6 pillar mindsets. So I'm like, one of our biggest challenges that we keep basking in the past and saying we were colonized, oh, the whites were so bad to us, rather than seeing a solution. So honestly, because I haven't been delving so much into culture and ways of progressing human nature per se, this was the first kind of thing that I read that had solutions, proposing solutions for the future. I may not agree with everything per se, but at least I'm happy somewhere is having a solution to get us out of that crying and more of finding the solutions rather than fault finding. So thank you very much. And for that, I actually applaud you.
Thank you. No, I really appreciate that appreciation. But you delved a little bit into the paper itself. But if formally I could ask you, how would you summarize the EDISAC framework?
Okay, by the way, I'm not very good at Prestige. I never scored very good marks in Prestige, but I'll tell you, for those who care to listen, that this is a summary of 4 books on that. I haven't read any of the other 4 books, but the summary gives me a clear picture of what Mr. Shirunda really wants the world to know. He talks about, of course, the history, like tracing Africa's history back from 42-21. That is something I'd never even imagined. Looking at the Nile Valley, but most importantly, talking about the 6 killer mindsets, and then finding a solution in what he calls the EDISAC concept. And the EDISAC, for the benefit of all, although he is the best place to talk about it, is basically about having some kind of, I didn't crown them, but I know there is era. You tell us, but there's something about era from past ancestry, then ethnic identity. I love that very much. Individualism, then seeking adaptation, and then the civilization bit. Actually, I'll talk about what I found really my favorite later. But that, when you talk about the 6 killer mindsets, I love what you call the victimhood. Actually, that's another vocabulary I only picked from you. I knew victimization of victims. Now, victimhood really is where most Africans are. And then we have the elites, what you call the elites, elite dilemma. Dilemma, in my opinion, actually, the worst bit of it is that people who are actually educated, instead the ones who are supposed to pull the others up because they are knowledgeable. Unfortunately, and you put it so well in your book, they instead want to become more westernized. So the more they are educated, the more they want to be more European and more American, rather than try to dig deep into that which differentiates them to become. I found that very, very interesting. Then the inferiority complex. Many of us are brought up to believe the white person is superior. In fact, you bring it up very well in your summary when you say that we talk about marginalization of the blacks, but really we exacerbate it. If we allow ourselves to believe that we are marginalized, we'll actually feel marginalized because we are what we feel. We look at a situation whereby people are actually having what we call inferiority complex, not because they are inferior, but because they have let themselves to believe that somebody else is more superior, somebody else is more capable than they are. In fact, I was saying that one of the things that you put very well in this book is the fact that we look at being colonialized as something that we should be worried about. So we have this inferiority complex. And then you talk about the fact that we think that somebody has come from somewhere and they're going to control our economy, control our emotions, as well as control our physical beings, which is practically unacceptable. But we are letting it happen, going back to the 6 killer mindsets as identified by Yvonne Mpanga. I love the elite dilemma, and I think I've talked about it. He explained it very well. As we get more educated, we want to become more westernized. Then he talks about the inferiority complex, something I find you also brought out very well, because we allow the Europeans to control not just our economy, but also our emotions, as well as our physical beings, which is unacceptable because it's within our control. Then we talk about the victimhood. We keep saying, we're colonized, we have this. Then he talks about the self-hate. It is more or less in line with the inferiority complex. But now we hate ourselves. We wear foreign hair. We want to have artificial nails. We want to have everything that's the standard that has been set for us by the Westerners, rather than try to exalt that which is ours. And I find that very important. Then you talk about the eagerness to embrace. I don't know any cultures that love to embrace like Africa. Sadly, they'll never embrace the good things. They are the ones who want to take up homosexuality. They are quick to take up anything pseudo. As long as it is negative, they're quick to. They are slower to pick the good things, sadly, especially our younger generations. Imagine tattooing of the body was an African thing in the beginning. Remember, the Maasai would have their ears. And today you find the Europeans are copying that tattoo bit. And we are going back to that which we had actually abandoned because the Europeans are doing it. So we find we're so eager to embrace, and that mindset issue, you bring it up very well. Then we have the foreign culture. Of course, the foreign culture is in line with the way we feel inferior, so we want to embrace the foreign culture. Then the hard identity. That is actually one of my favorites. When we think of a hard, the hard mentality, sorry. You actually want to be among the crowd. You want to move with the crowd. You don't want to stand out and stand for what you believe. Many here in Uganda, many people are like that. When you say something like on a business group, everybody inboxes you and says, this is it. But when you tell the world, they're like, no, they want to go with the flow. So it becomes very difficult for people to literally understand that when you have something you believe in, like now Emmanuel thought, there must be a solution to Africa's problem. We can actually have the whole Nile Valley speaking one language. I found that very interesting also. But it's
work
possible.
that can be done. It's work that needs to be done.
Yeah, and it may not, and I love the way you put it. It may not be, we may not live to see it. And one of the flaws you point out in your book is that the hard bit of it is that we may not test it in a quick time for us to realize that it can work. But if we put our minds to it, if we work together, we can actually transcend the tribal clouds, and then become more of a group of people that have the same beliefs and can actually speak a unified language. But that is a tall order, of course. So I love the whole idea. Then the era from past ancestry, then the dominant identity. Like I told you, individualism is actually what I relate with the most. And then we now place and how we move forward, articulation, and then of course the civilization bit. I don't know, like I said, the C was never one of my best, but I hope in a nutshell, Anybody who hears me would, I took the trouble to understand what he talks about, and most importantly, relate with most aspects of it.
That's good. No, it's really nice to hear what readers, how they digest my ideas and points. So I really appreciate hearing from your angle.
Interestingly, I was amused when I saw that you actually just did your master's. I wonder whether that was part of your thesis.
No, no relation.
I saw somewhere on social media, there's no relationship with that and your thesis, because you did some very good research about Africa's culture.
No, this is just my hobby.
I remember when okay, wow. I remember when I did my master's 10 years ago, actually, more than 10 years ago. But mine was about corporate social responsibility and corporate social investment. And when I read your book, it made me realize that perhaps the only real corporate social investment we can do today is to enable and empower our employees, to enable and empower our children, society, to appreciate the value of that which is around them before they can struggle to embrace the Western cultures out there and become, to lose their individualism, basically.
Yeah, no, that is a good point. And I guess you put that in practice in your business, in your work, empowering employees. That's what I hear.
Yeah, it's like I have been lecturing. Okay, because of COVID-19, I stopped in January 2020, but I was lecturing. I teach people who specialize in marketing. And one of the things that I like to identify with is to make people appreciate that they can be individuals themselves. They can actually identify with that which they believe and transcend the whole idea of I must do this because the European does it this way. I have to do this because my religion says this. You see, these things help us to shape character, but we have to dig deeper into ourselves to appreciate that life is beyond that which has been passed on to us, but we rediscover our own selves.
Wow. That's a very good point. And actually, I mentioned that in the paper, in that many of us have this appetite just to belong, just to be part of the group. Yet, as you're saying, if we individuate and we are proud of our unique characters and personalities, then we can actually get to contribute as opposed to belonging. Yeah? We get to contribute and create the world, because everything, whether religion or tribes, they were created by men. Yeah? It might be 1,000 years ago. Yeah, someone created it.
Somebody came up and sat down and thought about it. Of course, especially our religious fanatics, will tell us that some of these were inspired by God, but still God inspired men, and can still inspire you today to bring up something different. So.
Yeah, God did not write any book. Every book out there, a person wrote it. So you can also be inspired right now to write God's book, maybe. So it depends on.
By the way, just on a lighter note, because I'm Yvonne, which is obviously not an African name, I was told you should have a name like Esther or Mary or Sarah. And one of the things my mother told me, I recall, was that we are all saints. So you could become Saint Yvonne because God can use you to write something that will add to so many other books. So it becomes important for us to know that in our individual capacities, we can have the calling that those prophets who so much amplify also had, if we just allow ourselves to be.
Wow. That is so true. That's so true. It just, people have to believe that. You have to believe it. I have to believe it. And then we action on it. We action or live our lives as if God is on our side, or we are being inspired by God. Then we will have value for ourselves and in what we do. Okay. To get back to the interview again, what would you recommend, or if there are people, there are Africans or non-Africans who would want to read this book, why would you recommend them to read this book or this summary paper, EDISAC?
Actually, I've shared this with many people that I believe for anybody who believes in Africa's destiny changing, you will agree that because of our leadership, Africa's destiny, or somebody could think we are doomed to be at war, we are doomed to be poor, we are doomed to be dominated by other people. We have read and seen so many things that actually show that probably even some of the drugs we take are given to us just to keep us lower than we should be. But all that is possible if we allow ourselves to explore and understand where do we really come from, to take the pride to know that it is not enough that civilization started from Africa, but even religion did. That I discovered from reading EDISAC summary. The realization that the Nile Valley actually has evidence that the real ethics of before Christ actually was in Africa made me out. It's like, okay, I thought Arab believers and all that, the gods and all that were taught to us, but we had our gods that's different. But even then, there was a supreme God, as the EDISAC concept actually tells. As Africans, it is time for us to accept that we don't have to embrace, actually, you put it very well. Let's pick that which we need from these religions, these foreign cultures, and then try to keep that which unites us. And that is what really makes us unique. That's what differentiates us. We can't differentiate ourselves by wearing artificial lashes, wearing artificial hair, I don't know what balms and all that.
Yeah.
Those, but I'm telling you, people think that is a way of differentiating themselves. But really, let's look at those things that we will read. Actually, you talk about writing. Can we really discover our official writing, our own scripts? Because the cultures that have really developed, the Chinese, the Japanese, the Indians, the Ethiopians who were never colonized, they had their own unique dialect. Is it possible for us to actually rediscover? That's one of your recommendations, I recall. Rediscover how we can even have our own writing script so that we can have that African identity that nobody, that is foolproof. Today we are mixture, and some of us are comfortable that way. It is okay for us to embrace and be a mixture because society is evolving. But what makes us unique is the fact that we have that unique identity that can actually become, being the largest, being the continent that has it all. If you ask me, we never needed to depend on anyone for anything. We have it all. Yet because we have allowed ourselves to be dominated, we continue to. So I would recommend any African to read this book to answer your question, majorly for two reasons. There are solutions to the problems that other people whine about. Here, at least somebody has made the efforts to suggest what we should do. Now, if you don't agree, what are your suggestions? For example, going back to a little bit of criticizing the book, because I know you haven't reached there, but I believe in individualism. But I don't believe that for us to grow Africa, we need to forget about our tribes. I actually have heard you say, and I read that the Busoga tribe is actually not up to 200 years old. Buganda might be a little older, and languages keep evolving, tribes keep emerging. In Uganda alone, we have more than 50 tribes. So obviously, any development based on tribes would be foolhardy. But I believe that what makes people become really individualistic is to know I'm Yvonne Mpanga Simwogere. My father was Mpanga, a grandfather to Walusimbi Mpanga, a grandson to Walusimbi Mpanga, and the history goes on. When you know where you come from, now the name is not enough. Now let's look at those values, those core ideas that will make our cultures unique. And then by knowing the uniqueness, then we now look at that which we can all embrace. So we can't abandon the tribes altogether. And by the way, I'm a pure Muganda. I don't have any mixed blood, both maternal and paternal.
Okay.
So I say that with pride. And I'm not saying that I'm going to dictate where my children will get married because they're also pure Waganda. But I'm saying there is something beautiful about knowing the purity of a soul in some sense. There's nothing wrong with having mixed blood, don't get me wrong. But the tribal aspect, if we don't put it above growth of emotion, if we don't add it, tag it to emotions. Remember, you talked about three things when you talked about that. You talked about the test, actually. I remember you talk about are you able, do you have an Africa, okay, a name that is not?
Yeah, that's the triple heritage test I
Yes,
wrote about.
actually, I love that as well, because when I did the test, I noticed I was falling short greatly. Because in terms of religion, I inherited someone's religion. In terms of culture, of course, I inherited a culture. Though I am very comfortable
Mm.
with my culture, I know many things have been abandoned and should be abandoned. But I don't want us to lose the fact that I am a Muganda from central Buganda, from the Bantu region, that speaks almost the same way as the Zambians, and that sets me apart. So if we, as we look for solutions, let's not abandon altogether that which makes us unique. Today, there are people who hate the central part of Buganda and probably the eastern because of their unique way of dancing, their unique way of relating, their unique culture. Some of them might appear obscure, but that is what differentiates them. Without that, they are gone. I studied in India, Emmanuel, I'll tell you, and I learned to wear my sari there. But when I came back to Uganda, I found more Ugandans wearing ready-made saris for their culture functions and less of their gomeses or shukas. That means that the Indians, even when they go to Canada, they know that they remain Indians, even if they are cosmopolitan. So we can't abandon. Now, our African heritage might have to abandon I'm a Muganda and become I'm an African. But we must not forget our roots at the same time. And that's probably where I want to put a bit of emphasis when it comes to your summary.
Yeah, no, I agree with you there 100%. And for me, my whole proposition of the fourth heritage is what you're saying is an individual choice. Like what I'm saying, the way you've articulated is 100% correct, is fine. But there are other people who, due to their experiences, because everything comes to experiences, there are some people, for example, who have been abused in maybe a religious way, and they leave the religion of their parents, and for them, that's a personal choice. They are like, I'm done with that, and then there are other people, like I talked to a gentleman 2 weeks ago who was born in Southwest Uganda, and he really, really had a bad childhood in that part. But then he came to Uganda.
Caused by religion.
Sorry?
Caused by religion or by the cultures there?
Actually, culture, mainly the tribe. And he came and he said he feels like an adopted Muganda because he has married a Muganda wife and he's very prosperous in Uganda. And so for him, when you try to tell him that he's from over there, he just has bad memories.
Yeah.
So he has bad memories and he likes his wife's culture and the children is bring them. So that's what I'm saying is a personal choice because people have experiences that you cannot brush,
Yeah. Okay. If individualism is determined that way, then I have no problem.
Yeah.
What probably now you have to enforce or to advocate for is that as you decide to be an individual, you must not, we must accept, by the way, that we are individuals. That is by choice. But the question perhaps I'll pose to you as somebody who has done more research in cultural aspects is that, does alienating myself from a particular culture make me cease to be one? Just because I'm saying, okay, if I say I didn't like growing up as, or like I said, I'm a Muganda, and I'm not a Muganda by choice, I was born like that. But if I'm thinking, if probably growing up in Buganda, my father had taken me to go and worship idols, and yet my mother believed so much in the European God, the Jewish God. Please, I know my mom would be offended even if I said. But the Jewish God that doesn't look like any African God or any African who we have grown to believe and is a part and parcel of our lives. But if, for example, I was traumatized by seeing these people saying Lubale or what, that happened and I didn't like the experience, would that not liking the experience mean that I am no longer Muganda because I've denounced it? Because I believe that with, especially today being a Sunday, some people are praying, they're saying, try to cut down all your ancestral ties that might be ungodly. Well, I have never believed that everything ancestral is ungodly. Although I believe that there are things we have to keep behind because humans are spirits, that I also believe. Now, knowing that humans are spirits, I would hate for, okay, I would find it interesting if somebody says, I am no longer this because I had a bad this there. I would probably just say, you are that, and it is unfortunate that those people believe that way. How can we help them see life differently? How can we help our fathers who thought that worshiping more than 10 gods, a god of rain, god of the sea, god of the lake, and now know that there is, even Africa itself had one supreme god, even if those other worships, whatever, there. So I think, like we said, running away, that brother of mine, by the way, I watched that show. I think I watched that show. That brother of ours who had a bad childhood and decided to embrace her wife's identity. It's okay, and that is what makes them unique as individuals. But have we stopped to think that we need to solve that problem so that no other person who comes from there should feel like it is wrong to come from a particular group of people? Because the way it sounds now is everybody would want to hate that particular thing because of what happened to our brother, rather than find out how do we help those people there, make the best of their uniqueness without necessarily being a trauma to their children even as they grow up.
Yeah, no, I agree with you 100%. But how do we do that? Maybe come up with a program, and that's why I'm very interested in starting an organization next year, just to see how we can actionize such things.
You already have the partners.
Yeah, that's good. We need to come up with a program, a plan, and then we debate and get funding, and we make things happen. I agree with you 100%.
All is in our courts.
Yeah,
really.
We can do it. We can do it. Okay, the last question.
Part of the speaking?
The what?
Is that part of the speaking in EDISAC?
The speaking? Yes.
Speaking?
Yes. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And then the last question I wanted to ask you is, you have children and they're going to school. What ideas have you gotten from the EDISAC paper that you think will have influenced how you should educate your children? Especially, there are things out there in school that are not useful for us. I can tell you several things I was taught in primary school, secondary school, that contributed to my inferiority complex or to my hating myself. You understand? So as I grew older, I realized I didn't need to be taught that. Yeah, you know that. Anyway, there are negative things I don't want to go details in. But as your children go to school and they come back and you interact with them, any ideas you picked from the EDISAC that can help on that journey?
Yeah,
Teaching our
what I picked and is very true is the fact that our children brain formation and general culture, general character formation is below 7, and you make some recommendation for the different age groups that will approach the paper. My last born is actually 9 years old. My first born is 17, which will be 18. But one of the things I tell them on a daily basis or whenever I have a chance to is that you are an inventor yourself. If you're on Business Trends, you should have seen a picture of my son trying to play around with some electric gadgets that I posted last week. I tried to make them discover that the discovery of anything under the sun was because you are uniquely you. Now, of course, because many of us are raised to believe that you need a particular type of resource to be an inventor or to discover yourself, and we need to be literate in English. We unfortunately do not have much of a choice. But I also, EDISAC has told me that if I'm looking for a solution and I want my children to be people who are going to propagate the African language, you gave it a particular name, that African language, what role can my children play today?
Yeah.
We are in a society where we speak better English than our local dialects. The question is, do we need them? Yes, we do. But what if we needed them, but we even were perfect at them, and we're trying to find another language that a Musoga will understand, a Munyankore will understand, a Zambian, a Kosa, or whatever will understand, and then we become unique. All inventions are done in a particular language, whether it's a computer language or what. If
Yeah.
we have a unique language, our secrets are more secure. But today, most of the African secrets are insecure because of that. I think I read somewhere about people in China who had proposed to give servers to some Africans, and then an African organization. Then they realized for more than 2 years they were monitoring everything they were doing. So for us to become the unique individuals we have to start with our children, and EDISAC is very clear on that. Because some of us are already so much of fanatical in terms of religion, some of the things we believe, and in my language we say Akacha Mamamira, when you are grown up, it's difficult to bend you. But we have a chance for the unborn child, and EDISAC puts it very clearly, to train them to discover their uniqueness, not to be, yes, like the parable of the skinny father.
Of the
For
skinny
them to
father.
know that they can't blame the passerby who was mean to them, but to find ways of making themselves ready and able to face the challenge. As a matter of fact, I no longer want my children to read the history about slave trade and all that.
No, that is a very small part of our history. People make a big deal out of it.
And it doesn't even help them progress. It instead instills hate in them. I want them to come up and attack the enemy from a different angle. That I'm a Ugandan, born in Uganda, with or without slavery, which is no more. Today is a new day, and I have to solve my problems, proving that I'm more witty than this ABCD that I'm with here. So what I can do with them, take back home and be uniquely. So that I try to inculcate in my children. And I believe every African should.
Good. Yeah, if I can retort back about those 2 points you mentioned. The second one about the slavery. Yeah, it is so mind-enfeebling, especially people out here who want to define African identity or heritage as all about slavery. It is so sad because slavery was just maybe maximum 400 years. Africa has been there for 100,000 years or more. African civilization are more than 10,000 years. How can you say 400 years is everything that defines who we are and how we should relate with Europeans or other people? No, that's one of the errors that I bring about, that many of our politicians or educated people, it's an error for them to bring everything about who we are as Africans to our color and our this negative aspect of our history, slavery. That's not who we are. It's just a blip.
And to reiterate what you said about slavery, there is no more slave trade in the technical sense, but you'll be surprised how many more people are enslaving themselves today. So we can't possibly look at, like I said, personally, I don't want us to attack our solutions through the angle of hate and excessive emotion. I would want us to attack our solution from an angle of a lesson learned and overcoming these lessons learned. What mistakes did our fathers do? They were braver, they were stronger physically, they had the resilience, that they were greater fighters. Where did they go wrong? Now we can't fight physically, we are fighting with our brains. What can we do? What can we eat? What can we put around us? What do we need to read to help us get out of that? Rather than basking in the past and like said clearly, slavery was just a small part of us. In any case, we enslave ourselves, if you ask me.
Yeah, of course. And even I've talked to people who I would call willing slaves. There are people who want to go to Saudi Arabia, to Europe, to do like slave-like labor. And you talk to them and that's what they want to do. So their mind is gone. So you're right. Some of us enslave ourselves. And if you want to be a victim and you say our poverty is because of outsiders, now again we get back to victimhood.
Exactly.
We have to break this cycle. At the end, you have to say, you know what? This is what I was dealt by God, by nature, and how do I make lemonade from this lemon tree?
Lemon tree, exactly.
By
the way, I need to also clarify for our viewers out there, because some people might misunderstand us. We are not saying that going to Saudi Arabia to work
Mm.
is a very happy choice, because some women or some men will tell you, I can never earn $1,000 in a year if I'm in Uganda. But if I can earn $1,000 in 2 months, then why not be a happier slave? Now, until, and I repeat, until the African says, I would rather die than stoop to a particular level, I usually tell people that God made us differently. In society, there'll always be a sweeper, there'll always be a king, there'll always be, in Uganda, we say our fingers are not the same. So I'm not saying that we can all be equal, but there, even when you choose to go and be a sweeper, you must earn all the respect that a sweeper deserves. Even when you choose to go and be what we call chair, even when you choose to go and take care of the elderly, or when you choose
Mm.
to clean a
Mm.
pit latrine, we clean them in our homes anyway. But the point here is, in, are you given the respect that you deserve as a human being? Do
Mm.
you have the rights? Does somebody recognize that without your efforts, then they are lame as an organization?
Mm.
In Uganda, that's one of the things I advocate for. From the gate man, I tell people, from the gate man to the sweeper to the tea person, they may earn different money, but their importance is as much. But now the
Mm.
challenge with the slave,
Mm.
with the victim mindset or victimhood, as you call it,
Mm.
right, is that we do it with so much unhappiness. And personally, if I have to do any job
Mm.
because I don't, because, as in, to use the word, mbera, so I have nothing to do,
Yeah, better.
yeah,
Yes.
then I will pass it on as something really bad. But there are people who actually clean happily. And what we should do is to do whatever chore we make a choice to do as individuals, to do
Mm.
it in the best possible way and happily too. So if we
With our
can get,
human dignity intact.
yeah, with a dignity intact. So there's
Mm.
nothing wrong with cleaning the house, all right,
Mm.
if that's what you have chosen to do
Mm.
willingly, like Emmanuel said. But
Mm.
when you do it, you must be doing it in a way that you are respected, you're doing it with dignity, and when you walk out and face that PhD holder, you look at them
Mm.
in the face and say,
Mm.
without me having cleaned that place, you wouldn't have had a good day.
Yeah,
Yeah,
confidently.
we can make that very clear to ourselves, that everyone is important, but the way we attach, the way we look at certain jobs and the chores we do is part. And we should be willing to die, not to do that which makes us lose our uniqueness
Mm.
and
Wow.
dignity.
Very, very, very good point. All right, that brings us to the end of our interview. I don't know if you have any final word before I sign off.
Emmanuel, first of all, I have to thank you for looking out for the likes of us. And we need more youth who are finding solutions rather than blaming or victimhood, as you call it.
Mm.
I'd like the people out there to actually appreciate that it is actually possible. It is very possible to have an Africa that is united. I personally, and this is really personal, I personally mourn the death of Gaddafi, dictatorial as he might have been, but he had a vision that we have failed to see through. I look at Libya today, I look at some of our neighbors, Sudan, as it was about 15 years ago, and I cry saying, we could have done this differently. I look at Uganda itself today, and I'm like, yes, so much has changed, but what is it that we are not doing right? Why do we keep running away? Why do we keep distancing ourselves from the real solutions that really are on our fingertips? Is it the leadership? So my call is
Mm.
actually to start with this evangelism of EDISAC with our leaders, so that
Mm.
they appreciate that for as long as the Western education is going to be glorified, yes, I have a master's degree, you have a master's degree. We want our children to be very educated. And
Mm.
yes, we're now advocating for skilling or skilling our youth, but we need that knowledge. And knowledge is hidden in literature. How do we get our
Mm.
African literature
Mm.
discovered and taught to our people to understand not just the bad things or the very negative things that Africans see, because people will tell you Buganda grew by fighting the Bunyoro and all that. We don't need that, but we want to know
Mm.
what the good things that happened for us as Africans that our
Mm.
children must not lose value of, so we can get our leaders to amplify them even in our education system. And if we can get that right, then
Mm.
maybe we
We have
That's
a
how
chance.
it's been for us. And we may not live to see it, like you rightly put it, but we'll certainly have a better Africa if we just allow ourselves to try.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you so much. That last point you mentioned there, the fact is, if you're trying to do something big, something consequential, it takes years, decades, generations. So the problem with us is sometimes we don't have that view of 30, 60 years. One of the things I'm gonna be talking about next year, I don't know if I'll write a book or just make it a topic, is this whole fact that, do you know the English, the British spent 68, 70 years in Uganda. That's it. Like if you see when the first British came to when they left 62, it's about 68 years, 70 years. Guess what? In 2030, it will be 68 years of independence. So we will have been independent as long as the British were in Uganda. So after
And yet,
2030, yeah, will we be
the
complaining?
impact may not be,
Yeah,
it will still be winding, and
yes.
that's a good vision, and
So that is why my EDISAC, the viewpoint is decades, in 30 years, 40 years, what will our children push forward after we have started? Such that when you're 70, when you're 80, you are somewhere and you look at the young people and they are growing the seed, then they will die happy people.
true, very true, and that should be every elite, the African elite's dream.
Yeah. Yeah, that should be our elite dreams. And I think I wrote it in there. When we grow old in our land, how will we be growing old? Because we shall have children and grandchildren. But as long as we know those children and grandchildren are pushing this self-emancipation program, then we'll die happy,
Yeah.
we'll die happy.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. All right, that's the end of the interview. Thank you so much, Yvonne Mpanga. And for the listeners, thank you so much for tuning in. And remember, everything we do on this channel is to inspire the change of mindsets, especially our African mindsets. See you next week.